We'll be talking about accessory work and its application, and we'll be going over execution of it, how to program it, why we do it, and how to, We'll be talking about accessory work, which is, I hate accessory work, I'm not gonna use it. We'll be talking about supplemental work, which is commonly, and how to program it. Welcome back to StatCast. On today's video, we'll be talking about supplemental work, commonly known as accessory work. We'll be going over the why behind it, the qualities it targets, how to program it, and how to execute it. So what is supplemental work? Supplemental work is basically all of your non-SBD work and its close variations. So things like pause squats or pause deadlifts, tempo bench, those would still be SBD work. Things like RDLs, like your bicep curls, belt squats, and those kind of movements, those will be the supplemental work. So when we're talking about supplemental work, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask any powerlifter, they will tell you supplemental work or accessory work is mainly for hypertrophy work, which I don't think is the case. There are multiple qualities or different goals we can use accessory work or supplemental work for. We can use supplemental work to enhance skill, and that can be anything from controlling any structure, and it could be shoulders, pelvis, which will enhance our technique. Another one would be obviously like hypertrophy, just to increase your potential. A bigger muscle has more potential for more force production. Like another one is supplementing or enhancing force production. While sometimes on SBD it's difficult for us to isolate specific areas like your legs or pecs. Specifically, I would say like for like the lower body movements, those are a little bit more difficult to isolate because like the lower back gets involved, other areas also gets involved. So we can use supplemental work to isolate the quads, for example. And the last one is movement variability. Our SBD movements are usually very biased into one direction, like they're super extended, like big chest on bench. You see like maybe like some rounding on the deadlift or whichever pattern you get into. So if you keep repeating this pattern, you might start running into issues. So using the supplemental work to fill in any gaps when it comes to movement variability would keep you feeling a bit loose, not feeling super tense whenever you go into your SBD stuff, and in turn, you perform better. So why do we do supplemental work? If we think about a scenario where a lifter only does SBD work, which it does work on these four main qualities, but it's not really the best for any of them. Your squatting, benching, and deadlifting is not the best for hypertrophy. It is good for strength production, like for force production and developing strength, but it's also very costly. It is also a good way to enhance your technique. It is like the most specific thing, but if you're gonna only do SBD work to learn how to protract your shoulders and control your pelvis, it can also be very costly, and there is more efficient ways to do those things. And one thing SBD work doesn't do is it doesn't work on movement variability unless you program variations, close SBD variations that work on those movement variabilities. From managing our budget, it's not the most efficient way to program. Only doing SBD work to get all these four qualities is not the most efficient way. So we would get what we need out of the SBD work, then use the supplemental work to enhance our force production, to build up more mass, which again is not, SBD is probably like the worst option when it comes to that, when it comes to the return, the stimulus to fatigue ratio. That's something we're probably gonna mention. The stimulus to fatigue ratio when it comes to SBD and like how it relates to those four qualities is very poor. Yes, it hits most of them, but it's not best at any of them. So using supplemental work it is an easier way, a more efficient way to get that stimulus for a relatively low fatigue cost. So now we'll go over the how. How do we execute our supplemental work to target these four main qualities? So the first one will be hypertrophy, which is the most common thing people think whenever they think supplemental or accessory work. They think, okay, it's only for hypertrophy work, and which we established it does. There's like more applications of supplemental work. 90% or more powerlifters don't really do their supplemental work correctly when it comes to targeting hypertrophy. So the main two drivers when it comes to hypertrophy are mechanical tension and proximity to failure. Given that those two are the main drivers, and obviously the volume will increase the magnitude of this stimulus. So if we do a lot of volume, like 20 sets, but all these sets are very far away from failure, the mechanical tension isn't really localized to these areas that we're trying to work on, you're not really getting this hypertrophy stimulus. So exercise selection plays a big factor here, and the execution of it, and I guess like how hard you push those sets. The second one would be enhancing force production or strength. So when it comes to force production and strength, I think of strength as the ability to produce force, and like the main two drivers of that would be weight on the bar or like actual load, and velocity also plays a factor, or intention, I think, because like you are forced to move this weight at a specific velocity so it doesn't crush you, but you can also be a little bit more intentional and trying to produce as much force as possible, which enhances or increases force production. Like the more weight you have on the bar, and like the faster you move it, the more you produce force. And same idea with strength as hypertrophy. You need to make sure the force production is localized to these areas you're trying to work on. If you're trying to enhance your quads ability to produce force, then you want to make sure the positions complement this goal. So you can't be belt squatting with your hips behind you or hinging your belt squats if you're trying to enhance your quads ability to produce force. Then we have what I would call it like movement, like for movement variability or health or feel good movements. Those don't really have to be pushed super close to failure, because like the point of them is not to build muscle, and the load on them doesn't have to be super high, because like it's not really the goal here. We're just trying to open up some other pathways for us to move on our SPD stuff. So we can do things that will load different patterns just for the sake of loading that movement pattern and keeping that movement option open. So if let's say if you're a person who hinges everything, maybe doing some supplemental work that focuses on letting the hips move vertically, letting the pelvis drop straight down and up in a squat motion, because like you're used to pushing the hips back every time you squat or deadlift. So doing something that will kind of load the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to movement variability can be useful, just kind of keeping you loose enough and not running into some like your usual like tightness here. I feel like really tight in the front of my hips, or my SI is feeling super tense. Doing work that loads the opposite end of the spectrum is helpful there too. And like we said, it's only about loading that pattern. As long as you hinge correctly and you're not cheating your hinge, you're not cheating your squat by maybe like extending or like just bending at the knees and not really letting the hips drop, or hinging your squats, or like the similar idea with the RDLs. If you're doing a hinge, you see people cheat them by bending the knees too much or flexing the spine, which kind of defeats the purpose of those movements. So execution when it comes to movement variability is the biggest driver here. The last one, enhancing motor skills, or just skills basically, just kind of knowing how to move your body better. If you're someone, I think it also connects with the movement variability. because like you need to know how to move your skeleton in a specific way to be able to execute well on SBD. Like let's say for someone who has trouble protracting their arms on deadlifts, and they just physically like don't really know how to protract, and when it comes to deadlifting, if you just keep cueing them, it is like a bit too heavy for them to be able to execute these things, and like there's a lot of pressure because like they're trying to lift super heavy and they're trying to focus on like protracting the arms and whatnot, which is not the best environment for teaching a skill. So doing things like positional drills where you just kind of lay down on the floor and protract the arms, or do like an RDO and you can stop halfway down and let the arms protract. That would work on the skill of protracting the shoulders, and it's a better environment to learn that skill. Then whenever you go into your deadlifts, you have more context of what it feels like to protract the arms or tuck the pelvis, and you can do things like one video we recorded was the wall supported hip rolling, where you're just gonna push your back against the wall and you move your pelvis in and out of anterior tilt and posterior tilt, which gives you context of what it feels like. So whenever you go into your SBD stuff, you know how to do those things so you can enhance your technique when it comes to SBD stuff. And most of the time, moving slow actually helps you learn these skills better. So you don't have to move quick, you just have to relax, make sure you're getting into these positions and understanding what it feels like to do these movement patterns basically. And the last part is how to program them. And after we went over the execution of them and the stimulus basically of what drives those adaptations, this gives you a hint of how to program them. If you want to program for hypertrophy, it probably has to be very close to failure. The exercise selection has to be very specific to isolate the mechanical tension on the specific muscle groups, and the volume also plays a factor, and that will be just like how much magnitude of that stimulus you want. Do you want to target the quads 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever it is? If you think it's a big bottleneck when it comes to that person, then you have volume to kind of change the dial of what's the magnitude of the stimulus, but making sure that the proximity failure is there, the exercise selection and execution to isolate the mechanical tension on these muscle groups is there. So that will kind of cover the hypertrophy. Then the next one would be how to program strength work. So when it comes to programming strength work, like we said, the biggest thing here is how much load is on the bar, how fast are you moving that weight. So if we are programming, let's say belt squats for this strength quality, then we gotta make sure this person is loading it fairly heavy. And yes, the velocity might drop as a result when load is heavy, which is fine, but the biggest, the point here is the force production on those movements has to be really high. So like those grindy reps are fine as long as like weight is heavy enough. But once you start seeing the person kind of grinding reps with lightweight and like you're trying to target strength, it's probably like not the best, like those are not the best reps for that quality. And like the amount of volume, the same idea, that's like the magnitude of the stimulus. So how to program them, it just depends on like how big of a bottleneck it is for that person. Depending on what weaknesses you see in their lifts. If this person reports weakness in the legs whenever they go to squat, then okay, like you know there is lack of strength when it comes to the legs, and you can fill in that gap programming things that will be loaded fairly heavy on the legs, pushed really hard, intentional, trying to push as hard as possible to produce as much force as you can. But that will be basically like how we program the strength aspect. When it comes to movement variability, that one, like we said, we can insert it. I think the timing of these things is also crucial because we usually get tight, and because like we're dealing with a lot of compression when it comes to powerlifting. So timing these things in a way where you put that movement that will help you feel loose going into a specific movement, if you know this person gets very tight in the upper back, so giving them a movement that will kind of load this protraction pattern before a session where this person needs to feel loose for maybe like creating a rack, that's like something I deal with. So whenever I time my accessory movement or supplemental stuff that is targeted towards opening up space in the upper back, I usually try to do it maybe right before my squats or the day before my squats. And because like it's not loaded heavy, it's not really gonna interfere with your squats. If anything, it's probably gonna enhance it. You're gonna feel better getting under the bar. And like the volume with those, it doesn't, you just kind of need to do the minimum you need to get that effect, which sometimes like it might be like a set, 2 sets, then you kind of feel loose enough, then you're good. And you can do it right before your SBD stuff, the day before, or even between sets to kind of help you move a little bit better, so you're not mis-executing due to, I guess, feeling too tense, like because like you're not loose enough, you don't have like the movement variability to squat to depth or hinge well. So those can be inserted anywhere as needed, but I would say doing them before your SBD stuff would be like the best place to put them, because like they will help enhance your SBD work. The last one would be motor learning or skill acquisition, and with that, I think that can be placed anywhere. And the same idea with the movement variability. It doesn't have to be super heavy, and like you basically just need to do the minimum effective dose when it comes to that to build this context. So maybe also like doing it before you need that skill. If you are trying to work on making your arms longer, like we mentioned on deadlift, maybe doing it before your deadlifts or the day prior, or maybe even between your sets, doing things like any protraction based drill will kind of enhance the context or like your understanding of what it feels like to lengthen the arms, so whenever you go to execute your deadlift, you are in a better position. And like I mentioned, volume doesn't matter that much, intensity doesn't matter that much, loading, usually like there's no loading on it. It's just about creating this context and this skill of moving the skeleton in a specific way that will help you maybe change your technique in a manner that makes it a bit more efficient. So in summary, supplemental work is not only for hypertrophy work, it also can enhance any of those 3 qualities we mentioned besides hypertrophy, and it could also work on other qualities that you think are necessary for the person, whether it's muscular endurance or just cardiovascular endurance. If you think that's needed to enhance the person's ability to perform their SBD work, that can also be implemented. But the point is, hypertrophy is not the only quality supplemental work addresses. It addresses anything that can enhance your SBD work, and the way you prescribe these things can be very crucial. It can make or break someone's program because it plays the biggest factor, I would say, in filling in those gaps that the person is missing. Be very intentional with your supplemental work and use it to fill in any gaps that you see in your lifter, and ask for videos of your lifters because I think usually the supplemental work is skipped or seen as an accessory, which by definition it means it's not really essential for the person's progress, and it's not needed in itself. But in some cases, it's more needed than SBD work, because SBD work sometimes like doesn't really fill in those gaps. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.